What's good, family? Welcome to the movement. Welcome to the mission. Welcome to the place where truth don't get sugar-coated. And just so you know, it's a good day to be a soldier.
What's up out there, YouTube? You know, today was interesting, man. I was walking into I was in the checkout line, right, at a store, right, for a discount. And talking to the cashier, I was overhearing that conversation that she was having with another female. And in this conversation, she was telling this lady how, because, you know, I was ear hustling, I ain't gonna even lie. She was telling me how she almost got fired with somebody blaming her as the lead cashier for ultimately attempting to steal some about the cash register, some money that was stolen out the cash register, some money that didn't get counted right. And you know, as a cashier, that is generally very, very important. And so, without necessarily, you know, identifying personally who it was, I said, yeah, it's always just this one group, huh? She said, yes. And I just turned around and started rolling because I'm a person, you know, I got fired for like 3-4 jobs over this one group, primarily just hating on the fact that a black man has a job. And so we going to get into details because I believe that the only way we going to be able to get along is we can call a deuce and a spade a spade. And for that reason, I'm going to go over here to the Border Security and Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. And I'm going to just let people know that, you know, you can no longer fool nobody with regards, and you know what, you really wasn't trying to fool nobody. You was really being honest and being upfront about it. But now, you know, that this whole immigration thing has come into play, that now we have opportunity to just simply be real with each other.
Laura Rees, Director of the Heritage Foundation's Border Security and Immigration Center.
Good morning and welcome to our event today on weaponized immigration and U.S. citizenship with author Peter Schweitzer and Senator Eric Schmidt. Let me start with a quote from Peter Schweitzer's new book, The Invisible Coup, which will be the discussion of today's event. Quote, "Our debates about immigration revolve around what happens with immigrants once they arrive. We need to start talking about who is sending them and why. For decades, establishment elites sold us the story of immigration as a compassionate renewal of the American dream within a harmonious melting pot. But beneath that narrative lies a different reality. Mass migration has morphed into the most powerful political weapon ever aimed at the United States, one engineered by elites at home and aided by adversaries abroad," unquote. He goes on to write that other countries have been using immigration to the U.S. to destabilize our democratic republic. He starts with Cuba in 1980, the boat lift to the U.S. After President Jimmy Carter announced open arms to those on the boats coming from Cuba, Fidel Castro strategically sent violent criminals, psychopaths, drug dealers. He wasn't sending their best, as President Trump likes to say, to trouble the American homeland. Quote, "The beauty of migration as a weapon was that it twisted the reputation of America as a champion of human rights around the country's neck, and America would not see the noose until it was too late." Castro's designed exodus was what Peter Schweitzer calls the proof of concept. He goes on to write about Mexico, Venezuela, China, drug cartels, Islamists, all who exported nationals to the US, and American politicians who welcomed the numbers for political power. We need to have eyes wide open about this mass migration phenomenon. This isn't the 1990s anymore. But the left and some on the right will repeat the old arguments they've used since at least the 90s, but they fall flat now to those who are awake.
What's up, Chaz? With this whole new SAVE Act, which is the Save America Voting something, right? I forgot what the E stand for. However, what you always hearing up out of there is this is the new Jim Crow. This is Jim Crow 2.0, which is not, you know what I'm saying? Because everybody has to have an ID. It's not like, people have a problem with traveling 20, 30 miles just to get to a DMV in order to get some form of identification. Necessarily, we have travelers now, you know what I'm saying? But these are the type of, if you notice, it's always the Democrat who want to, and now in today's current environment, who wants to have this racial push. And when you look at their history and you look at the elite, which were the primary landowners of all these agricultural farmlands, right, in which slaves were primarily enslaved working on, and then you had the indentured servants primarily in the north, but then you had white people who didn't own slaves in the south, but at the same time and own land, just like these other landowners who own land as well. So there was a separation because here you have what is called classes. All right. And because you were a white landowner and you wanted to develop your own land without the use of slaves, here you had a hierarchy over this slave class. And generally, even if you were poor, you were still considered a higher class than those people who were enslaved. And these individuals were in America. And this was how you come along in future times to the 14th Amendment. So this stems out of the Democratic, this whole racial divide thing stems out of the Democratic Party. And this is what you also currently see in today's environment, as they pretty much, what you could say they're trying to do is they are trying to destroy the white power systems. And by doing that, it's what keeps them in power.
When you hear them repeated, scrutinize them, debate them, because they are the old excuses to continue this weaponization. Phrases like, Americans won't do that job, but that job is an ever-growing list. Agriculture.
Man, ain't you tired of hearing that? Because I know for one thing for sure that I am a person that I'm going to do what I got to do. I'm tired of hearing that Americans won't do certain jobs. And it's harder for us to get into certain jobs because while people from other countries have been able to go into jobs, and develop work experience, right? Learn their experience by being on the job. You have made it harder for individuals to have entry level into these jobs because now that it's been a boom and they have so many workers of what they already need, they're not concerned about getting employees and provide you with that on the job training, that the entry level to get into these jobs is that much harder. You can see in some of the union jobs with regards to the construction industry. And you wondering why it's so hard it's such a big requirement for you to get into the construction industry. You got such a leap forward from what used to happen to where the apprenticeship programs wasn't 5 years long. But this is the current environment that we're living in with regards to the workforce, with regards to trades, and our schools are being taken out of our schools in support of colleges that just simply want you to get education and agree that this leads you to a dead-end job, because here you have a corporations that's going and getting individuals through legal immigration with H-1/2 visas. So here we are, we just continuously knocking the American citizen out of a job when we have a workforce that is not being utilized.
Construction, hospitality. We need more foreign nurses. We need more foreign doctors. Since when won't Americans do those jobs? We can't find Americans to fill these jobs. We need more immigrants because our birth rate is falling. The cost of lettuce is going to skyrocket. Immigrants add more to the economy than they cost. Immigration enforcement is racist and Islamophobic. And now, post-mass migration, the cliche, but we're a nation of immigrants, takes on a whole new meaning, particularly as we also now face weaponized obstruction to deportations. So today, our speakers will discuss how and why mass migration has happened, and what do we do about it? What does it mean to be a US citizen anymore? We have a lot of paper citizens. What do we do about them? So starting us off will be Peter Schweitzer, president of Governmental Accountability Institute and author of several books, including Extortion, Clinton Cash, Profiles in Corruption, Blood Money, and his newest book, The Invisible Coup: How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. Following Peter will be Mike Howell, visiting fellow to the Border Security and Immigration Center. He will be introducing Senator Schmitt and will be moderating the panel. So please join me in welcoming author Peter Schweitzer.
Yeah, if y'all haven't read the book, The Coup, go ahead and check that book out, man, because all the stuff that he's talking about within this book, he's going to speak on right now. However, he provides you with the evidence, all right, to establish everything that he's talking about in the book, right? So go ahead and pick up that book. It's called The Invisible Coup. He's somebody that I did a show on not too long ago. Not that many viewers watched it. So if you want to go see a summary of the book, go ahead and check that out. I'll provide you with a card and a link after this show. But we're going to go into details. We're going to allow him to talk because everything that he talked about right now, he got evidence for you to go check out.
Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. Immigration is very different than it's been throughout American history. My parents were immigrants to the United States. I'm a first-generation American. But things are different, and I'm going to contend today that things are different in part because what foreign actors are doing, and they are weaponizing immigration and using it as a tool to undermine American sovereignty and to advance their domestic political interests inside the United States itself. So I'm going to do that not by positing my theories, but just quoting from some people who explain what their motivations are behind mass migration. And I want to begin with our neighbor to the south, Mexico. We all think we know why mass migration is taking place, but let me just read a couple of quotes from high-ranking Mexican officials that explain why they are excited about mass migration to the United States. The first one is from a Mexican senator, Felix Salgado. He's a member of the ruling Morena party, sits on the National Defense Committee, which is one of the most powerful committees in the Mexican Senate. He said this just a couple years ago, quote, "Mexicans are in our territory, California, Nevada, Texas, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Wyoming. We're going to take back the territory that was stolen from us." What? When I first ran across that, I thought that was really odd, and I thought that Senator Salgado just must be a nutcase. But I kept finding these quotes. This is from Gabriela Rodriguez. She's a senior aide to the current president, Sheinbaum of Mexico. This is from a December 2024 official report of the Mexican government. Quote, "We already know that the Mexican population in the United States reaches 39.9 million. We Mexicans are reclaiming our territory." When we think of mass migration from Mexico, we think about it in the context of the economic forces that are pulling people to come to the United States. When Mexico's elite thinks about it, they think about it as a means by which they can exert sovereignty in the United States itself. If that sounds kooky and crazy, they back it up. It's not just comments and statements they make. Literally, there are dozens of them that I could quote. It's actually the actions that they engage in that include this desire to exert political sovereignty in the United States. So what am I talking about? Well, one of the things I'm talking about is the fact that Mexico has right now a network of more than a dozen senior Mexican officials who live full-time inside the United States, but they actually serve in the Mexican Senate and in the Mexican Parliament. In other words, their job is to represent Mexicans living inside the United States before the Mexican government. That is certainly an erosion into our sovereignty. But to take it a step further, these same individuals are also involved in organizing violent protests and riots in the United States. In fact, one of them, Alejandro Robles, who serves in the Mexican Chamber of Deputies, lives outside of Los Angeles in Ontario, California. In 2025, he went across the United States to, quote, organize the militancy against Donald Trump, end quote. This is a foreign government official. I could also look to the network of 53 consulates that Mexico has in the United States. They're doing the same thing. But the bottom line is that mass migration for our neighbor to the south has important political implications. And those political implications include exerting levels of sovereign political action inside our country itself. Now, let me just mention one other country that is engaging in similar sort of activities, but has a very different methodology.
Yeah, before you go there, this is the reason why I go into this, right? It's because we got to remember the whole Chicano movement. We got to remember the whole idea with regards to these protests and how it's trying to get sparked up. And you have our politicians who are working with some of these nonprofit organizations that pretty much they're participants of these organizations are from Mexico. And they are here to represent the Mexican population, the Hispanic population out here in the United States, while doing it specifically for the Mexican government. And you see, and you wondering how that when Trump say that this stuff is all organized, this gives you a full, just opening up of the ideas of what he's talking about, because it's not elaborated enough on with regards to what he means when he say that this stuff is organized. This stuff, these signs that it's out here, these signs, you see these signs, they're just not written. These signs have been printed out. These signs is, how do you get all these people to come together at one time with all these specific signs that they look the same? They got wooden sticks on these signs and stuff like that, right? So it appears to be organized. And this is what he's talking about. He's giving you an elaborate idea of we have foreign actors in our country who are participating in taking over the sovereignty of American citizens of America to establish their own right back into something that they believe was stolen from them, taken from them, and that they should not pay for, as in how America ended up obtaining the land, but actually steal. Listen, it's not our fault that you guys got put into a war. Not only did you got put into the war, but similarly, like the Democrats sold us out, right? Are attempting to sell us out, and we're fighting back. Here you are, your politicians So the United States, New Mexico, California, Utah, Arizona. So you have no right to say that the land was stolen. It was purchased, right? And the borderline that is between the United States and Mexico is specifically written up or drawn up because actually California had paid for, the United States had paid for more land, but they set the land back because that's the land that they actually wanted. So here we are. We keep on dealing with this issue to where we don't understand it while certain people are in the United States acting as our friend. As I go back to the woman in the cashier, right, who said that she was being accused of taking money from the cash register or not putting it up right, not counting it right, whatever was the result. And I just knew what group that was coming from. All of a sudden, they go upstairs and they found the money in the trash can in a room into which she has no key for. And they had to apologize to her. And I just knew from right there, this came from one group, huh? And she like, yeah, without even saying anybody, absolutely, we already know who was the target, which was her. Secondly, we already know who was the thrower of the implement to end up ultimately trying to get her fired. And I say this in appreciation of Women's History Month. I'm glad that the lady didn't get fired. However, this is what's going on consistently, to where it's like, black people, when are you gonna wake up? You got this dude that's seemingly sitting here that's telling you the truth about what's going on. A lot of white people actually know what's going on. But if we can't call a deuce and a spade, how are we ever going to actually get along with the Hispanic population when we haven't been able to actually get along for such a very long time? They denied us in the Black History movement, in the Black Matters movement. They didn't want to participate in that. The only way they participated in the 1992 riots was in order to assist in looting all the shops that was in our neighborhoods. But in terms of standing front line, the civil rights movement, that was black people. The Rainbow Coalition, that was headlined by black people. These are people that has only tried to be a beneficiary of everything that we fought for. And now, when you see places like Los Angeles, and you see that from when I was younger, all the jobs that have been denied to black people, right, in their own community, which has exploded so much to a point to where people like on the internet, it's like the Mexicans run LA. No, they're cheating, bro. They're cheating. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, but we got to call a deuce and a spade, right? And that's all I'm doing. They're cheating their way into the system. They're making they're acting like they are friends, and they're really not, and they really here because they want our land back. Like I said, it's all about the raza, right? What does the raza mean? It means that you keep your lineage pure. You don't mess with black people. Not only that, you look out for your black people, and definitely when you look at the some of the history with regards to them being counted in the census, they didn't want to be counted as colored people because they didn't want to be associated with black people, and they wanted to be counted as white. And now you have white people waking up to this, like this gentleman here, and they're saying, hold up, wait. Listen, this has been going on in the black community for so long that we just accepted it and we no longer see what's actually happening. Now let's go on to the Chinese.
And that would be our chief rival on the global stage, which is the People's Republic of China. China is engaging in industrial scale exploitation of birthright citizenship in the United States. That is the notion, the idea, interpreted by some, that if you are physically inside the United States, it doesn't matter why you're here, if you are physically within the borders of the United States, you get automatic citizenship for the child. In China, the Chinese Communist Party has actually run articles in the People's Daily and other publications explaining to Chinese elites that this right exists, and in fact encouraging them to do so. And there is a massive birth tourism industry inside of China, more than 1,000 companies we've identified, that will make these arrangements for pregnant women in China. What they will do for a fee of about $80,000 to $100,000 is arrange for them to fly to the United States, get them through customs, arrange for the medical procedure. The child is born. Once the child is able to fly, flies back to China, where it will be raised in the People's Republic of China under the auspices of the CCP. The problem is that child is now, according to this interpretation, a U.S. citizen. And even if they only spent a few days here at their point of birth, and even though they have been raised in communist China, when they turn 18, they're going to be able to vote in our elections, contribute to political campaigns, and donate to political campaigns and take government jobs. So this represents a massive security threat, especially when you look at the numbers, the massive scale in which this is taking place. Now, our federal government does not keep track of this data. There's no federal numbers on how many from China and other countries have done this. But the Chinese government has looked at this, and research firms have, and the numbers are eye-popping. Chinese government believes over the last 13 years, on average, roughly 50,000 children have been born in the United States every year. There are experts like Professor Salvatore Barbonis from Australia. He's an Australian professor who, by the way, is on very good terms with the Chinese. He believes it's closer to 100,000 a year. And then there are Chinese research firms, one that estimated in just a single year in 2018, this Chinese research firm believes that 180,000.
And it's that much more severe when you actually think about how American citizens are beginning to have a lot less children because the affordability crisis that is happening with regards to all this immigration is so severe that here we don't want to have children in which we cannot take care of. Now, with regards to China, what they're doing with their birth tourism thing is that they are just having a child over here in the United States, going and taking them back to China and raising the child in China. However, because they are United States citizens, they're allowed to vote. They're allowed to come over here just anytime and just do as they please, just as an American citizen. And through their citizenship, they are able to continuously have access to things like business loans and things of the such. Now, this stuff has been honing in since the Trump administration. Why I appreciate Trump so much is because I look at the devastation that has occurred in the black community since the 1980s, when absolutely, blacks were always seemingly to be the one projected to be drug sellers and stuff like that. But there were other drug sellers. There were white people who got caught up in the whole war on drugs as well, right? However, when you've seen depictions of pictures of individuals who were the primary individuals who were selling things like crack cocaine as opposed to powder cocaine, you always seen that picture being of an individual that was a black person, right? So here we're getting locked up in prison, and since the 1965 Immigration Act, we're getting replaced primarily by the Hispanics, right? And not only by the Hispanics in our neighborhoods, right? The Asian populations are able to have businesses in our neighborhoods and have access to loans that ordinarily we wouldn't be having access to because they just had that credit. They have the ability to not have a history in the United States, have the ability to say, okay, well, we don't want you to take your business into our neighborhoods, but you can take them into the black neighborhoods. This is why you see so many swap meets in in Los Angeles back in the day. I think probably I've seen at least 2 or 3 SWAT meets that's no longer here anymore in the city of Los Angeles, right? Alone. But just besides the SWAT meets, think about the other things that's other businesses like the little markets. This is part of the reason that the whole 1992 riots kicked off, right? And why you've seen over 2,000, I believe it was 2,000 Asian businesses being destroyed by the rioters, right? At that time during the 1992 riots, because it was so much of them having ownership into our communities, into where we wasn't having access to that, and it ended up getting a person like Latasha Harlan killed. And now, when we're looking at the jobs, how the Hispanic population is always seeming to be said as the hard worker. All right, like I can't work, like I can't do a job just as hard, right? And then they get into these positions to knock you out of place or to manipulate some type of situation and get you knocked up out of the job. Here you are, you have areas in California. When I look down there by Alameda, there's a street called Alameda, where you seen that you don't see a black business, you don't see a black person working down this entire strip from Imperial, man, to so far down. You just don't see any black people even down there. And I'm just seeing the influx, like 39 million Hispanic population. This has just occurred with regards to the whole Immigration Act of 1965. When first, if for Lyndon B. Johnson to want to take, for Lyndon B. Johnson to want to take the leadership, or the leadership with regards to that bill, and the whole thought of that bill was to die down on white supremacy. While seemingly, it really hasn't. All it did was knock down the opportunity for black people and white people to actually continue communicating with each other after having so much domestic fighting going on, to where so many black people felt like they didn't want to work for the white man. They wanted their own opportunities to create the businesses, but you didn't do that. You end up giving these businesses to the Asian population. You end up having the Hispanic population, no matter if it was from Mexico, it just come from the southern border, attempting to outwork black Americans. And black Americans necessarily didn't want to work for white people. Like I said, we wanted our own opportunities. We wanted opportunities to own businesses such and such as well. We wanted our opportunity for that money to circulate within our community, right? However, on top of that, you bring in drugs because black people didn't get drugs from nowhere. You bring in cocaine into our communities, which built up with the cartels, right? You sent us to prison. And all the time, men are being taken out of our neighborhoods, right? The women are believing less than us because they have to raise the child on their own. We established something that, particularly out of the Black Power movement and after the Black Panther Party, known as the Bloods and the Crips. This has been the devastation, and all this time, you have so much immigration coming over into this country to where you're looking back at this picture now and it's like, oh my God, how are we going to fix this? How is this stuff going to get fixed when on paperwork, through paper, these people have a reasonable way to fight against us actually reversing the effects of what we've done to ourselves, talking about white people. Instead of continuing to bridge that gap between white people and black people, here we are, we made it larger into a point to where the first thing that's going to get you back on the right foot is going back to the thoughts of the 14th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, that it was made, that bill was made for the children of slaves. That's the first point you got to talk about. And then you have to have this whole idea of reverse migration. And now the whole spectacle as well is about to get into, besides the fact of getting rid of ICE, you know what I'm saying, or having ICE actually, because all ICE agent is a federal bounty hunter. When you look at an ICE agent, what's the difference between a person not going to court and somebody a bounty hunter coming to find him, than the ICE agent who coming to find somebody who has entered the country illegally? If you don't like what bounty hunters do, then you really not gonna like what ICE agents do, because they're doing the same job. If you can report to court, if you can report to court, the court gives you a date, gives you a bond, and on that date that you were supposed to return to court, you don't show up to court, and the court issues you out a warrant. Here you are, and the bail bondsman, because he released you out on bail, he's the one who's has the authority to go get you, or in some way, I forgot how it affects them, right? I can't think about it right now. However, the bail bondsman is going to be the first one to try to get you, because that's his job. So what is the difference between the ICE agent and the bail bonds agent? There is no difference. And that's the reality of the situation. You can't deny ICE agent from doing his job. There's probably ways to go about it, but how else, if somebody's able to kick in my door, draw a gun on me to get me to go back to court, you know what I'm saying? What's the difference? Well, if I'm listening, police has kicked in my door looking for family members of mine since I was young. I was in preschool. You know what I'm saying? So I know to look at that, but with the idea of that, am I supposed to expect anything different from anybody else? Or is it the fact of the matter is that these individuals are being organized to a point from these elite, or from some of these organizations who are in the United States, who are actually working with the Mexico government to go up and protest with regards to this issue. And this is why I say that the Democratic Party need to be looked at as a terrorist organization, because you're associating yourself with this whole idea of these protests and the whole idea of defund ICE. You're allowing these individuals to do exactly what, they want to do. These other countries, these other nations, it's like you working for these other nations instead of working for the United States citizen. You got to put two and two together, and it's like, this is why Trump keep on saying that these people is crazy. They want to destroy this country. They ultimately want to destroy this country, when if there's anybody who is supposed to come next, it's black people. Because in all actuality, we have always come first when it comes to not being able to be participants in the full spectrum of what this nation has had to offer, when we are the number one contributor, besides white people, to the building of this nation. Listen, I can continue forward. However, I'm going to stop it right there, because he got into the whole Chinese idea with regards to this whole birth tourism that is trying to come out right now, right? This birth tourism thing is killing the United States to where China, one thing for sure, China believes that it is an older country. And what do I mean by that? China has been around for 5,000 years. And so when I look at a country like America who's doing so good with the age that China is, it shouldn't be number two. It feels like it should be number one. And the only way that you're going to be able to necessarily become number one, which, you know, you've had successful reigns where you were the number one power for so long, you know, around the world. However, the only way that you can become number one again is to swallow up number two. The only difference is, in this instance, in trying to swallow up number two, what you're doing is you're biting the hand that feeds you. Tiny Cross-H.U.G on the Trumped Up Live show, man. Always remember to like, share, subscribe to the channel. It's a good day to be a soldier.
They said transformation was impossible. Faith, facts, and fire. Tiny Cross-H.U.G style. They said